Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. My name is Ben Lister, and welcome along to the Radio Legends podcast, episode 18 here today. In this series, as you know, I chat with the icons of radio about their career, life in the radio industry, and in the world of the wireless. So let's meet today's contestant, shall we, in a Chris Tarrant style format. I'm not going to do my best Chris Tarrant impression because that'll embarrass myself, and I don't want to do that, but let's just meet today's contestant, shall we? From East Yorkshire, Driffield, I think he's originally from, but he lives somewhere near London nowadays, I think, and it's an honour, a privilege. A good friend of mine, Jonathan Gold. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome along.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for inviting me on today. And been called many things, but definitely not an icon.
How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. We're recording this on a Friday afternoon. The weather is absolutely super, and it's just nice to relax and look forward to the weekend. But yeah, all good.
Are you in the region of the drought?
Yeah, we have, unfortunately. I mean, that's the privilege you pay for living in the south of England. We do get really good weather. I've just been for a walk around the park, and we've got a massive big, I guess it's some playing fields, but also they play football there on a Sunday. And literally, it's not green, it's brown grass. It's absolutely just, scorched. So, how things have changed over the years. We'll be complaining in about 5 months' time that we've got localized flooding and there's non-stop rain.
James Whale lives on the other side of the capital. You live on the other side. He lives on the Kent side.
Yeah, hey Kent. I'm in Buckinghamshire. I'm in a town called High Wycombe, which I guess is very close. I'm about 10 miles north of Heathrow Airport, kind of the Reading area, but very close to West London as well. So I'm kind of just on the outskirts, just about 5 miles away from the M25 westbound.
And the closest radio station in London terms to you would have been the old Capitol Euston Tower building, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
we're in a weird part of the country where we're just literally on the fringe of like the capital LBC heart area. I mean, our local BBC is BBC Three Counties, but we are so close also to the Berkshire border. So, and we also get BBC London TV and ITV London. But yeah, radio wise, we don't have a. We used to have a commercial station here years ago, and this is going back in the 90s. It was called 1170, which was on medium wave. Then they moved over to FM and they called themselves the Swan because at the time I'd realized, why do you call yourself the Swan? But there's a Swan Theatre here in Wycombe. But yeah, officially we don't have a commercial station. We got Wycombe Sound as the community station, but yeah, we're on the fringe of London, so we're kind of part of London, but on the fringe.
Yeah, and also now that greatest hits are moving closer to Euston Tower, it's going to be a throwback for you people like you. Before we start, Pat Sharp and all them lot who used to work at Euston for Capital.
Oh yeah, that was an amazing building. I remember as a kid going down to London for the day with my friend. We used to go anoracking. At the time, this was like '88, so there's only Capital and LBC around. So we used to go into the Houston Tower, and it was amazing with the staircase going up to the studios, and used to buy Capital sweatshirts and mugs and get all your merchandise. The days when you used to go to radio stations to buy merchandise, who'd have thought it? Eh?
Yeah, and one of my favourite presenters at the moment is probably going to listen to him later on tonight, Des Paul.
Right, yeah, I remember Des. Yeah, so there's lots of good presenters around, and it's finding your right presenter you like and someone you enjoy listening to.
Yeah, I was listening to Debbie Mack the other day.
Debbie, another one I remember from the days of Galaxy, and I think she was at Vibe in Bristol, top of my head.
And she was also on not many people know this. I think she was on Capital FM for a while.
May have been. I went through a phase back, I don't know, 2003, five, when it changed to Capital Radio. I kind of lost the kind of passion for it at the time because it had gone through a
And
lot of changes.
yeah, sorry, before we start, and a lot of people don't really like some of the ex-presenters think Capital should have just stayed a London station, and they still call it a London station.
I guess in a way, I mean, people talk about how their stations have got networked, etc. But actually, for people living in London, well, LBC has now not become a London station as much as it was. Maybe Capital and same with Heart. So actually, people in London have lost their local stations networking as well. Despite you can do split links, and in London, when you listen to London's Heart, it still has the jingles London's Heart, and but it's still not the same as it used to be.
No. Anyway, we'll talk about that as the interview progresses.
Definitely.
Yeah, six. That's good. 6 questions about your broad radio career, if that's okay with you.
Let's go for it.
You've took the words right out of my mouth. Question 1: where did you start your broadcast career?
I lived in a small town, as you mentioned, Driffield in East Yorkshire, where I went to school. I grew up, and my dad played rugby with somebody who ran the hospital radio station. It was the East Riding General Hospital, which was a bit of a weird building. I think it was originally a workhouse back in, I don't know, the early 1900s, late 1800s. I did it there, the grand old age of 11. Going around the walls, collecting requests. And I think I've still got some cassettes of me lying around when I was about 11, 12. I was dreadful. So I did that, moved across to Leeds, joined the hospital station there, joined Radio 8 in Leeds as a helper. I was on work experience, and I got to help out the presenter on a Sunday afternoon, and then became a tech op when Magic launched Radio 8's AM station. I used to do an hour of nothing but the 60s on CD and playing the jingles on carts. I used to do that. And then I went to uni in Hull, joined the hospital station in Hull, and then I did a demo when I was at Energy Radio in Wakefield. That was the RSL station at the time. I think Riding's got the license eventually. So I was doing some shows there at weekends. So I put a demo together, sent it off, and I got my first gig doing shows on MFM Marcher in Wrexham. I was doing overnights, did shows on Broadland, and I got on a job offer to work at Strain Harrogate. Didn't been going a number of years. So I got the evening show, and then I worked down at SGR in Ipswich. That was a great show and also a great station. What else did I do from there? I went to work at the Bay Lancaster. That was it. And then I became comprod. So my career changed from a presenter. I was still doing weekends at the Bay Lancaster, but I became head of comprod, making adverts. Never done that in my life before. But in radio, you say, yeah, of course I can do that. And it's like, what do we do here? That's my first time ever on computer editing. It was about 98, 99. I've also worked for the GWR group where I was making adverts in Bournemouth. And I worked for a production company for about 5 years in Manchester, where I literally was making adverts for lots of different radio stations across the UK and the Northwest. Then I ended up going to Juice FM in Liverpool at the time to be station producer. So I was managing shows, managing adverts, promos, being on air. And then I got to run a station in Huddersfield, Pennine FM, which originally was the old TLRC Home FM. So I got to run that as a director, which was great fun to create a radio station, have your own sound and have your own music. And then I got to do some cover work and a year's worth of shows at Heart in Wrexham, the old MFM. That was really weird to go back to there. And then I went to Ireland, been there to produce a talk show, worked at Red FM for a number of years. Then I got to go up to Belfast in Northern Ireland to be program manager for the Q Group, here, Q Radio in Northern Ireland, which was comprising of 8 stations. So I got to work there. And then I came over here and now working in broadcast PR and comms in London. So that's my CV in a quick 2 minutes.
And yeah, you are. And I don't think you ever got the chance to work for Pulse or Viking. I don't think.
No, it's weird because Viking was what got me into radio back in '84 as a kid. And I was about, I don't know, 9 or 10. I remember when Viking started doing test transmissions, where back in the day, for about 2 weeks, they played lots of music and they talked every 15, 20 minutes, say what was coming up on the radio station, and you could listen out, and they played promos. And it's always one station I always wanted to work at. I love the studios, and I knew a lot of people who worked down there and got to know a lot of people. But now it's one station where I never actually got to do a show, and now it's left Commercial Road, and it's now coming from Leeds. It's a shame, so I never did that. But yeah, it's always doing shows on your own area where you live. Is always a thing to do, and it's always nice. But on this occasion, apart from Harrogate, I never got to work in my area.
And also as well, like you say, Stephannie Hirst is still going strong in that literal studio that was made a lot of people famous.
Burley Road, LS3 1LR, I still remember. Yeah, me and Steph, we met. Now this is going back about 92. We were both tech ops. And I was doing shows, she was doing shows, and we just became really good friends. And I was actually working out. We've known each other now nearly 30 years. Lots of stories to tell, and some stories I won't be saying. But yeah, absolute. When you've known somebody such a long time, it's frightening how the time flies.
And also our best friend, Mr. Moyles, as well. who's done well for himself.
Chris was another one when I was at Air. I was tech upping, but I used to help out a presenter who I think is still on the Hits Network, Mike Toolan. So Mike was at uni in Leeds, and he came over to do some weekend shows and cover. And I used to, on a Sunday or whatever it was, used to go in and just help him out, get the CDs out, put the carts away, answer phone calls, etc., make the coffee. And Chris was doing a couple of shows. And then he left to go to work for Radio Luxembourg. So we kind of met because he was doing a few overnight shows and bits. So yeah, I kind of met him then. But yeah, a lot of people who work in radio who were just there in the background next minute become really famous.
Yeah, and also, and there's a lot of great presenters also as well. John Culshaw as well.
John's another one. Not that I'm name dropping or anything, but John was doing afternoons at Viking, and I was living over there. And when I did hospital radio, I invited him over, and this was before podcasts. He came on our show to play his favorite 5 songs. I used to do that every few months, get presenters on just to bring along their favorite 5 songs, talk about them, and we used to ask questions about radio and how they got into the business. And John invited me down to Viking a few months later, and I've got some pictures lying around somewhere. But yeah, John was another one. And he used to do his impressions, and I've got a tape, and I will dig it out somewhere of him doing lots of impressions, but as them people, and doing like name checks for me. So he's different celebrities at the time. This was about 1990. So whoever was famous in 1990, he'd do impressions, and you're listening to Johnny Gold and blah blah blah. So he used to do all that, and I've got them lying around. But yeah, before they were famous.
Gee, wow. And now we'll move on to question 2. Who were your inspirations when you were starting out?
That's one of the worst things ever, to be people who inspired to, because you end up becoming a worse version of them. I guess in a way, if I'm being honest, because Viking was my first station, there was a presenter on there called Dave Fewster who did the breakfast show. I think he now runs Beverly FM. And I liked him. He was called the aging groover, but it must have been about 30. But when you're about 9, anyone over 15 is ancient. But I remember listening to him and thinking he's really good. There's a few of the presenters I kind of liked when I, got me started out. James Whale was doing the late show phoning on radio. I used to listen to him when I lived in Driffield. The reception was atrocious, but I'd listen to it because it was entertaining until 2 a.m. I guess when I first started out in radio, so when I first left uni and started presenting at various stations, I think I was, and I use this term nicely, but a worse mix of all the presenters possible. So at the time, Hirsty was doing Evenings on the Pulse. That was an amazing show. Steve Jordan was doing, I think, breakfast or afternoons on Viking, and Simon Logan was on Viking as well. So I was like a hybrid of like 3 or 4 different people, which is sometimes good and bad. But yeah, be yourself. But yeah, they were the ones who got me kind of inspired. And I thought, well, I like you. You're really good. You make me laugh and you entertain me.
Were you a fan of Viking people who came after Simon Logan? Because I remember your clips that you did, because I think it was you and Stephannie Hirst messing around the Viking building on the overnight show.
Oh yes, I my video camera. I was the original YouTube blogger back in 1998, 99. Only if YouTube would have been around then, I would have been famous.
It was a few months, and it was the last month of her at Viking. Stephannie Hirst at Viking before she jumped ship
to Galaxy, leaving Viking, put on breakfast. That's it, from breakfast to overnight. So that was it. So I went down on and sat on the show, which was fun. Yeah, I mean, Viking changed a lot in the latter parts, but unlike most radio stations, they do, because competition changes, more local stations happen. So it's like anything in the world, whether it's a bar or a shop or a radio station, it evolves and changes. So yeah, Viking to me was my station I grew up with and got me into radio. And it was the one where I used to go down. My dad used to work as a sales rep and he used to do Hull on a Friday, seeing his clients. And I used to go with him when I was on holidays from school. And used to drop me for Viking. And Viking, if you've never seen it before, it was great. You go into reception, but you could stand in reception and look into the studios. So the presenter would be at the back of you and you could see into the studio. And I remember just thinking, wow, that's great. And it fascinated me, because at the time, back in the 80s, there was no computers. It was records, cartridges, as in cartridge tapes for the jingles and adverts. And that was it. You put the show together with literally your bare hands. And that fascinated me, how you could create a sound by records and jingles and adverts and what came out of your mouth. So that's what got me into radio, was that sound of it. And when Viking did it, I thought, wow, this is brilliant.
Yeah, and lots of different people came through the Viking doors, and some of the ex-Viking people have now gone on to carve their way in their own career down at the different BBC local networks.
Yeah, it's weird. I was talking to this conversation with a friend a few months ago where historically, and I'm talking about 80s probably, where if you left commercial radio, you went to the BBC or vice versa. You left, Radio Humberside, you go to Viking, but it's a different situation now where a lot of people have moved on to different things, and yeah, some people had left commercial radio and gone to the BBC, but what happened now is different to what was then. It's a different situation now, I think, especially when it comes to the media landscape.
I mean, Stephannie is a great example. She's gone full circle.
Yeah, I mean it is now. I mean, because there's less opportunities where historically, you could leave Viking and there was probably 30, 40 radio stations across the country, and you might go to Manchester, Birmingham, or Southampton or London, etc. Well, now it's different. So there's less opportunities. So you kind of have to go, if you want to keep in radio, you have to go where the work is, where before you could be more choosy. And historically, when you left the radio station, you very rarely ever went back.
In some cases, technically, you go back on the network, and I think that I'm quite impressed with the way Mike Toolan's doing with his stuff that he does now. I think he does. Is it Drive with Sir Actress an actress and
Gemma
radio
Atkins. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean it is. Again, if you fit into the schedule, and that's what's changed when it comes to the radio scene now. It's about fitting into the format, and I never really kind of got that up until when I rang Q Radio in Belfast, where you may be a good presenter, but you may be not right for the radio station. And there's a great line I used to use: "Great actor, wrong film." And I think that sums up presenters very easily, that they may be a great presenter, but they don't fit on that radio station sound. Chris Moyles is a great presenter, but he wouldn't sound right on Classic FM. And Stephannie Hirst is a great presenter, but would she sound right doing the breakfast show on LBC, for example? So I think it's about what you're good at and fitting you into that right format.
yeah, brilliant. And now we'll move on to question 3. What is your favourite part about the job?
Well, my favorite part of the job I do now, so I'm in broadcast, PR, and comms. So just to slightly explain, when you watch TV and listen to the radio, you see and hear people talking about specialist subjects, or you have celebrities talking about. A new survey out today shows that 85% of people don't get a good night's sleep, and it's usually sponsored by a bed company, for example. So my job now is dealing with clients. We get them on to Sky, BBC, radio and TV as well, to get them opportunities. And we do a lot of stuff with the producers, let's say, with Sky TV, Talk TV, BBC, where they'll call me up and say, we're looking for someone to talk about the drought, or someone to talk about the weather. Do you have anybody? And we have certain people on our books who we get them opportunities. So obviously they get a commercial message on the television and the radio. We're not talking to Mary, who's from so-and-so beds, etc. So that's my job now. So I'm working quite well with the producers. It's quite nice when you get phone calls from the Radio 4 Today program saying, oh, we're looking to get somebody on to talk about X. Can you help us out that one? Or Sky TV callers. So we do a lot with that. So that's my main job. So what I like about it is when you have clients on and you hear them on national platforms, and that's always a great thrill.
Have you ever worked with legends such as like Chris Tarrant or James Whale?
Not directly. I mean, for example, over the last few months, and we do so many of these, it's remembering who we do, but Dick and Don, we did some stuff a few months ago. Simon Reeve, the BBC travel presenter. We've done stuff with, who else have we done? Oh, Judith Chalmers last week. We did some a campaign with Heathrow Express. We did stuff with her. We've done massive amounts of different people, from celebrities to pop stars. Trying to think, some sporting people. So we get to do different things. So clients will get a spokesperson, and depending what they want to talk about, so we'll deal with them. So it's great fun, and you're dealing with people, and you spend 4 or 5 hours on Zoom or in a studio doing interviews, so you get to chat to them. But that's the good thing. So when you see your campaigns on the radio and television. That's a thrill. And actually, I got 15 minutes of my content is on Sky News or Look North, for example.
Brilliant. That's it for part one with Jonathan Gould, not Johnny Gould from Talk TV, sorry. So join me in a bit for part two, but for now, back to the studio. Welcome back to part two of my interview with broadcaster Jonathan Gould. 3 more questions, if that's okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, hit me with them.
Let's go for it. Question 4. What is your greatest radio moment?
Oh, there's loads. And I think when it comes to working in broadcasting, there's so much. For example, your first ever radio show, your first show on a different station. I think for me, there's a few, and I was thinking about this a few months ago. When I worked in Northern Ireland and I left there 4 years ago, when I worked at Q Radio, I achieved quite a lot, which a lot of people would never get to do because most stations are now part of a group or they don't have the budget. But when I worked at Q, before that it was City B, we were bought by the Q Group. I got to be part of the network. So we put a network together as we amalgamated City B and Q into one network. I got to test the network. So we just got Zeta installed, the RCS playout machine, and Zeta's fantastic for splitting jingles and adverts. And we'd never done the net split before. We never tried it. So I did the overnight show literally for the first time ever, branding it as Q and City B across Northern Ireland and making sure all the jingles worked, all the splits worked. So I got to test that. And then eventually we put the network together. I got to take the breakfast show every year for 2 years to Bulgaria. We took the breakfast show on a mountain skiing trip with listeners. That was great. Did the drive show on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, which was, again, I was really bizarre because I was obviously, when you do these things, you have to test the ISDN or the Comrex as it was in them day. So we took the Comrex and I literally flew from Dublin Airport to Venice, got on a cruise ship Sunday afternoon, tested the Comrex via the ship's satellite broadband, for literally 10 minutes, had the meal. Then the next day the ship dropped off at Brindisi, bottom of Italy. Got off there, stayed the day in Brindisi, then got a flight back to London. And that was literally, I'd gone down to Italy to test a Comrex for literally 20 minutes. And then obviously went to do the show live a few weeks later. I went to Philadelphia, Iceland. So yeah, things like that always stick in my mind as great achievements. And also we moved the radio station. So when we had Q, we moved it to part of the shopping centre in Greater Belfast because the owners had owned part of a shopping centre. So I got to design the studios. I was told by the boss, get a shopping list of equipment. So, I designed 3 on-air studios, 2 news booths, a production booth, and to be sitting there and literally just have a shopping list of what equipment to buy and then project manage it, which again was like, wow, not everyone gets to do that. And also I got to project manage and run. We did a radiothon for various charities across Northern Ireland. So I got through that for 3 days. It literally was a 3-day appeal, raising money with packages and guests. So that was the thing which will go down in history. So yeah, I've done quite a lot. There's one thing which does stick in my mind, and I wouldn't say it was a greatest moment, but definitely a moment. I was working at the Bay in Lancaster. So I think this was 98, 99. I was on there doing the overnight show, and they were 6-hour overnight shows. They were absolute killers. So it's like midnight on a Saturday night into Sunday morning, and there's reports coming through that Dodiad Fire had been killed in a car crash, and obviously Princess Diana was with him at the time. And then 4 or 5 hours later, there's rumors flying through that Diana had died. I remember ringing up IRN. It's about 4:45 in the morning. There's rumors flying around, and they go, "Yes, it's true. We're going to go with it at 5 o'clock." So then going into the obit procedure, my boss was still aware he was, and we were still using CDs. And obviously, obit has to be appropriate music, and a lot of radio stations don't have appropriate music. It's all chart music. And I found there was Kenny G. I think it was panpipe kind of music. I think that was the instrument he used, and it was called the Bird Song, and it literally was relaxing panpipe music. So I remember putting his CD on compilation CD on rotation, and then went into IRN's obit. So that was a remembering day when thinking, you started doing a show, going, "Oh, it's the overnight show, it's great, blah blah blah," and next minute you're driving home going, "What has just happened?" So that was very surreal and very, very a kind of strange thing. So yeah, definitely a moment. I wouldn't say it's one of the best moments, but it certainly sticks in my mind.
Yeah, brilliant. Question 5 now. How do you think the last 2 years has changed the radio landscape?
I think with COVID, it's made more flexibility, especially when it comes to transmissions, studios, guests, etc. And what I mean by that is historically, you're in a studio and broadcasters would want you down the line or an ISDN line, where now most things are on Zoom. FaceTime has taken over the quality from that side. A lot of stations now will happily do FaceTime interviews through your iPhone or iPad. So I think that's what's changing is the flexibility. We know we do interviews and meetings with TV stations, and they've always said, oh, historically, we want you in the studio. Well, time you organize the studio, you get an engineer to put it all together. That could take, a couple of hours and for a 5-minute interview, where now, a lot of stations like GB News, Sky, etc. Yeah, if you can go to the studio, fantastic. But they're quite happy now to send you their own IP link, or whether it's via Zoom or Skype, etc. So I think the flexibility is there now. And what's happened now would have happened probably in the next 2 or 3 years. So we've kind of, COVID has brought things forward a lot quicker, where historically it wasn't acceptable to be in front of your laptop or your phone. Well, actually now it's been fine for the last 2 years. So no one can ever say, can't do that. It's like, well, it's like working at home. If you had asked your boss, 4 years ago, can I work from home? What? Work from home? Well, now you ask, it's like, well, yeah, you can do, because they can't say no, because it was quite happy to do it for 2 years. So that's how I think things have changed when it comes to landscape flexibility. And when it comes to the radio stations, it'll keep on changing. There'll be more amalgamations, there'll be more buyouts and more sell-ins, the more DAB stations. So that side will change, where there'll be more choice and, more different stations.
Yeah, and also Viking Pulse and have moved into the radio air building. Do you think the last station standing on its own radio, Hallam, could move in there?
The $64,000 question, and I've said this to my friends, when Hallam leaves Sheffield and moves into Burley Road in Leeds, then you kind of guess what's going to happen. There's obviously a reason why it's still there, and most of the time it's usually because it's a rent issue or it's just not feasible at the moment. But you don't need to be in your area to do a radio show, especially when 18 hours a day is kind of like networked. So you don't need to be. It is not cost effective. Why would you have a building? Why would Viking be in Hull just for 4 hours a day, for example? And obviously news is coming out of there. Sales don't need to be in a radio station anymore now. That's all remote. So it's about saving money. And it's what I always say, what you put into it, does it generate more income coming out of it? And if it doesn't, there's no point.
Brilliant. Question 6 now. What advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out at the bottom of the broadcast ladder?
Be different, listen to other people, get advice. Don't presume you are the greatest because you think you are. And I've been there, because it's called an ego. Once you think, I'm great, what do you know? And if you're applying for a job at a radio station, listen to the radio station, listen to what they do, listen to how they sound. And when you're doing your demo, listen back to them and go, well, does that sound like a Capital presenter, or does that sound like a Radio 1 presenter, etc.? If it doesn't, then don't send it to them, because at the end of the day, you've got to sound like the radio station, and a program control will go, oh, sounds nothing like us. So don't send a speech demo to a music station. I had that when I was in Belfast. I got a demo of 15 minutes of talk. It's like, we're a music station. And that just sounds like you don't understand the format you're applying for. And get to know people in the industry. Ask them questions. Say to them, what do you think about that? And also, when you do links, and I used to say to presenters, and the old line is, a link has a start, middle, and end. But what's the reason for doing it? Don't just open your mouth and just talk rubbish. Everything you do on the radio has to be the best. Now, that could be that was a link, or it could be a great observation link. So when you're doing your demo, also make sure the first 2 links on that demo are the best. Don't put your best till the end, because the chances is they're not going to be listening right to the end. So just make sure your demo is great, get advice, and just keep on knocking on doors. You'll get knockbacks. Everyone gets knocked back in some capacity, and it's the ones, and actually John Coleshaw told me this back in 1990 when I was about 15, 16. It's the ones who keep on knocking on the door who get through. If you get put off easily and get disheartened, then perhaps it's not for you.
Brilliant. That's right. That's it for today. We are out of time. So thank you for joining me today, Jonathan.
Thank you, Rich Steve, for inviting me.
And thank you to you people out there for joining me today. So please give it up one more time for Mr. Jonathan Gold. Thanks very much for watching. This will be available on my YouTube channel in video form and in audio form on my audio form on my wix.com website, and there's a radio show on the station near you. Until next time, that's a wrap, and back to the studio.